My older brother, Nathan, hired a private investigator to expose me as a failure, but instead, he uncovered my multi-million-dollar success. I grew up in a quaint little town with my two siblings, and as the middle child, I often felt caught in the crossfire of expectations. In a place where everyone knows each other, the familiarity can be both comforting and stifling. My father is a hard-working man who keeps his emotions tightly sealed. He's now contemplating retirement. My mother, on the other hand, embodies warmth and tradition, maintaining our home and the values she was raised with. They come from deeply rooted religious families, and while I love them, I've always felt like I fell short of their expectations. The pain of being perceived as the family disappointment is a heavy burden to carry. In stark contrast, my older brother, Nathan, is the family's golden child. At 40, he's settled down with a quiet, reserved wife, and they have two sons who are obsessed with sports, particularly the rough-and-tumble kind. To put it mildly, they can be a handful. Nathan seems to take it upon himself to guide me through life, working as a car salesman at a local dealership. However, his mentorship often feels more like a project he can't quite manage, as if I'm perpetually in need of his assistance and should be grateful for any time he spends with me. He paints a picture of a perfect life, boasting about his athletic children, his powerboat, and his ATVs, which only deepens my sense of isolation. I was the sensitive child in school, often breaking down in tears and finding excuses for my shortcomings. I wasn't tough or athletic, instead, I was bullied and excluded from most activities. My asthma made me feel even more alienated, and my parents dismissed it as a minor issue. Alongside this, I've battled depression for as long as I can remember. I was never the child who could run freely or throw a football with precision. My parents frequently compared me to Nathan, remarking on how I wasn't as intelligent or outgoing, which only added to my struggles. I graduated high school with a dismal 2.5 GPA. After saving up some money, I enrolled in college, but I dropped out in my second year, sparking family controversy. My younger sister, Lily, is the princess of the family, but I don't know much about her since I left when she was a teenager. I see her as a bit overindulged, perhaps because it's easier than being the target of our parents' expectations. She often treats me the same way Nathan does. At 19, she had a beautiful wedding and now has 3 children. I can relate to her middle child status. I see a bit of myself in her, especially since she faces her own share of teasing. After leaving college, I embraced my nerdy side more fully. Over 7 years ago, I worked at a comic book and video game store, a job I truly enjoyed. Even though I've moved on, my parents still act as if I'm stuck there. The best part of my time at the store was meeting another geek with big ambitions. Together, we co-founded a successful IT support business. Eventually, my partner decided to sell our company to a larger corporation, and I was bought out with cash and stock options. It turned out to be a lucrative deal. I started several side projects and made wise investments, accumulating over $1 million in assets. Now, I work as the CTO for a new startup. Despite my wealth, I lead a humble life. My 2-bedroom house is filled with second-hand furniture, and I drive a 15-year-old Saturn. Currently, I'm single and lead a hectic life, seeing my therapist regularly. Alongside my melancholy and asthma, I struggle with alcohol, which my parents dismiss as purely mental. They fail to understand the complexities of my situation. Despite the ups and downs, I've carved out a successful career for myself. My parents expect me to join them for dinner every Sunday night, a trek that takes 90 to 120 minutes each way, consuming half my weekend. They seem to think that as an unmarried individual, what my brother calls a mental case, I have nothing better to do. These dinners are often challenging. I endure unsolicited advice on marriage, family, and adulthood for 3 hours, or I sit through lengthy discussions about Nathan's latest big sale at the dealership, which dominates the conversation. While they've never directly called me a mooch, the implication is always there. If I skip one of these dinners, I'm left feeling frustrated and confused. I often wonder why I continue to attend these gatherings. My family tends to downplay or misrepresent my accomplishments, and people back home still think I work at that long-gone game store. Nathan is seen as more mature and outgoing, and his successful career only amplifies the ridicule I face for my past retail experience. Things had occasionally spiraled into chaos, but everything changed last month. My brother, Nathan, somehow got his hands on some of my personal information. The truth is, he hired a private investigator under the guise of conducting a background check on my employment. I had a nagging suspicion that he was orchestrating an intervention with our parents. They were completely unprepared for what they discovered about me. They learned my true worth as a person, that I didn't live in a rundown apartment, and other private details. Ironically, given my work in security, I was able to trace the source of the breach after receiving notifications about unauthorized attempts to access my credit report. This revelation was a turning point, forcing me to confront my family's sudden and unexpected shift in how they viewed me. It was a lot to process, especially considering our history of miscommunication and undervaluation. In my anger over the invasion of my privacy, I decided to have the same private detective firm investigate Nathan's finances. What I uncovered was shocking. He was living well beyond his means. The investigation revealed a file with Child Protective Services, several past arrests for DWI, public intoxication, and domestic disturbance calls. He was struggling to make his scheduled back payments to the IRS and was juggling 3 mortgage loans on his house. Despite no ongoing charges, his credit was a complete disaster. In contrast, my parents lived modestly, with little more than what I already knew. They were realistic and pragmatic about money. I was so focused on preparing to confront my family at our next dinner, hoping it would create a rift, that I didn't even check in on my sister, Lily. However, the atmosphere at dinner was entirely different from what I had anticipated. My parents began treating me with an odd sort of reverence, as if I were the golden child. This shift clearly distressed Nathan. Midway through the meal, in a desperate attempt to restore his reputation, he started boasting about recent sales commissions and a supposed promotion. I simply congratulated him while tactfully mentioning his IRS troubles and poor credit situation. In other words, I highlighted Nathan's financial disaster while simultaneously acknowledging his accomplishments. The whole scenario felt strangely somber. The already complicated family dynamic became even more awkward due to my parents' sudden change in behavior toward me, which felt forced and insincere. Nathan disputed everything when I handed him a copy of the report, but I pointed out that by using the agency to investigate me, he had inadvertently opened the door to scrutiny of his own life. For a brief moment, that felt good. My parents, who reprimanded him and feigned shock, were clearly aware of the implications. The entire situation became unsettling, especially since the report required my social security number. It was a harsh revelation, and the ensuing argument exposed my family's greed and cowardice, deepening my disdain for them. As the evening wore on, accusations flew among my parents, and I made every effort to remain silent. Yet, at times, they directed their anger toward me. I would either shrug it off or respond with a nonchalant comment. My sister's husband, Nathan's wife, and their 5 kids looked on in shock as our family unraveled like never before. Our gatherings had always been routine and mundane. My sister would share updates, Nathan and his wife would boast about their lives, my mom would initiate conversations, and my dad would complain. But this time, the usual banter was replaced by stunned silence. A heated argument erupted between my dad, Nathan, and me, as they dredged up every relic of family strife from the past 30 years, arguing over who was to blame for everything. It felt like watching a chaotic drama unfold in real time. All my negative perceptions of my family seemed validated in that moment. In all honesty, I felt terrible. You might expect me to feel a sense of justice or triumph, but instead, I realized how poorly I had handled the situation. What had I hoped to achieve by exposing Nathan's wrongdoings? His children now knew about his tumultuous past, something I had never wanted them to discover. The situation reached a breaking point when Nathan yelled at me in a fit of rage. His harsh words, like "you should have never been born," were shocking, but what struck me most was the desperation in my parents' attempts to calm him down, a level of desperation I had never witnessed before. He accused me of being the root of all our family's problems. My parents tried to intervene, but they never truly acknowledged or accepted responsibility for how they had treated me over the years. I was left feeling both deeply saddened and vindicated. It served as a harsh and glaring reminder of the underlying issues within our family dynamics. My parents accused me of various things until I could take it no more. They implied that I could have helped but chose not to, claiming I was refusing to assist a sick niece or nephew. I had no knowledge of such a situation, no one had ever reached out to me for help. I suspected they were fabricating stories on the spot, but I didn't challenge them. Instead, I reminded them that they still believed I was working at the comic book store, despite my repeated explanations that it had closed in 2011. The way they misrepresented our family history to fit their narrative appalled me. After that dinner, I drove home feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. I felt conflicted, knowing they would likely pressure me to repay them now that they were aware of my financial success. I knew what was coming because I had witnessed how they treated Nathan in a similar manner. Yet, I also recognized and valued the fact that my parents provided for my basic needs as a child: clothing, food, and housing. Navigating this labyrinth of gratitude, bitterness, and newly established boundaries would be challenging. I would probably need my therapist's assistance to process this shift in dynamics. It was clear that setting clear limits going forward would be essential. Growing up was difficult because, to be honest, I was never the favorite child in the family. Nathan mistreated me, and my parents did little to intervene. They never physically abused me, but their response to his bullying was to act as if nothing was wrong. Whether he kicked, hit, or said terrible things, they completely disregarded it. It's concerning that they don't recognize verbal abuse as damaging or real. Verbal abuse is painful in and of itself, but it's even more hurtful when the people who are supposed to protect you choose to ignore it. I had fought this battle for years, and although I knew they were my family, I felt the need to maintain a permanent distance. While I wished them well, I believed it would be healthier for me to move on and start a new chapter without them. I found myself pondering what would happen if I met someone special, like a girlfriend, and we decided to marry and have children. How would I navigate these family issues then? It could get complicated, and I was trying to figure it all out. How could I introduce my new family to my own if I was no longer in contact with them? I had many questions about what lay ahead. Before diving into the update, let me offer some advice. Your family didn't appreciate you as a person if they only wanted you around to boost their self-esteem. They want you around to take advantage of your wealth now that they know about your financial success. You are not defined by your family, they are the problem, not you. You come across as a good-hearted, diligent individual who endured harsh treatment in your family circumstances. Put your phone away and continue living your life. You've done an incredible job creating your own path. Reduce the time you spend with your family as much as you like, they only want your money, and you know it. You can communicate with them however you see fit. Stay in touch with your therapist to help you transition into a life where they don't hold you back. Avoid pointless conversations whenever possible. Consider relocating, packing up your things, and starting anew. You are not alone in making tough choices. Many people struggle with family dynamics, especially when it comes to dating. Explaining these dynamics to a potential spouse can be challenging, particularly if they have strong family ties. But you will start your own family when the time is right. As for actions to take moving forward, if you haven't already, put a security freeze on your credit accounts. If Nathan used dealership resources to gather information about you, inform the appropriate parties. The dealership is unlikely to be cooperative if his actions involved fraud. Speak with an attorney. Despite your youth, mishaps do occur. Your parents would currently inherit your assets as your default next of kin, so put that in writing as soon as possible if you prefer someone else to be the beneficiary. You may feel sad about being apart from your family in the coming months, but talking to an expert will help you process this update. After the family dinner argument, it felt like I was leaving a war zone when I got home. I sped down the quiet nighttime road, lost in thought. I knew something needed to change. As soon as I pulled into my driveway, I realized I had to stop attending family dinners if I wanted to maintain my sanity. Over the next 2 weeks, I focused on my work and mental well-being. The gadgets and comic books scattered throughout my home were not only visually appealing but also served as a sanctuary for me. I stepped up my therapy appointments during this time. My therapist, Dr. Bennett, was incredibly helpful, using methods that felt more like building a fort than a wall. While Ava was around, the initial visits were naturally uncomfortable. My parents were overly polite and cautious, as if I might vanish at any moment. In contrast, Nathan seemed to struggle to express himself, searching for the right words. My sister and her kids provided a pleasant distraction, especially her middle child, who bore a striking resemblance to me and quickly warmed up to Ava. We settled into a routine of coffee dates, which felt like brief forays into family territory, short visits that allowed me to reconnect without getting entangled in the chaos. Surprisingly, this approach began to work. Over time, my family adjusted to the arrangement, perhaps realizing that this was the only way to keep me in their lives. They started to respect my boundaries, and as things improved, I began to think more about the long-term future with Ava. I envisioned building a solid family foundation based on respect and care for one another, rather than obligation and guilt. Of course, I knew there would be challenges ahead. One summer evening, while walking by the lake with Ava, I reflected on how far I had come from feeling abandoned by my family to standing on my own with a clearer sense of who I was. It felt like day and night. I held a cautious optimism for the future. I felt prepared, even though I knew the road ahead might be rocky, with potential potholes the size of craters. Setting limits with my family after Ava was about more than just self-protection, it was about making room for new connections and a fulfilling future. The infamous Sunday dinners were still on the calendar, but now they occurred according to my preferences. I attended occasionally, skipping other times, and I brought Ava along to family gatherings. We discussed any issues that arose, and while there had been significant improvements, challenges remained. The key was finding that balance, keeping things harmonious without being overwhelmed. Hi everyone, I'm still learning how to share my story online, so please bear with me. Let me introduce the main characters. I'm the storyteller, and we have Peach, our daughter, Mario, our son, and Daisy, my soon-to-be ex-wife. We are currently navigating a challenging separation that is quickly turning into a very acrimonious divorce. The primary reason for our divorce is that Daisy accepted her bisexuality earlier this year and expressed her desire for an open marriage. I was not comfortable with that idea, and things took a turn for the worse when I learned that Daisy had slept with my coworker, who is also one of my closest friends. That revelation felt like a betrayal from both my home and my workplace. As a police officer, I couldn't stay in that situation. I took a break to think things through. Daisy did everything she could to keep us together at first, but when it became clear that I was adamant about not opening our marriage, despite her reasons and pleas, things turned nasty. Daisy's perspective shifted, she became bitter, and the last thing I wanted was for her to use our kids as pawns. Daisy started telling Peach that she had to leave our home because I no longer loved them. She claimed I hated them and was destroying our family. Hearing that was heartbreaking, especially given Peach's obvious confusion and grief. Our kids frequently visit Daisy's mother, where she currently resides. Daisy and her new partner try to make these visits seem like exciting vacations, presumably to play the cool parents and turn Peach and Mario against me. They shower them with toys and candy, which adds to the mental struggle. Daisy and I disagree on nearly everything, from deciding who should inherit what belongings to how much financial support one of us should provide to the other. The hardest part, though, is figuring out how to split Mario and Peach's time. Daisy fights against every compromise we try to reach, making things more difficult for herself. Recently, she has been telling our kids things that paint me as the bad guy, which feels incredibly unjust. For instance, Peach and Mario have been asking me if I dislike Daisy's new partner, whom I'll refer to as AP. It seems like AP adores them more than I do, which is a major disturbance to their minds. A few weeks ago, I was working on a significant project at work, putting in a lot of overtime in pursuit of a promotion from police officer to homicide investigator. Daisy and I had agreed that the kids would spend this busy time with her and come to see me on the weekends. I would stop by when it was time for them to leave for Daisy's. One day, as I handed Mario his packed luggage, he exclaimed through tears, "Are you taking us away because you hate us like Mom says?" That moment was heartbreaking. I hugged him tightly and assured him that I truly loved him, even though it felt like a lie. It was strange, despite my best efforts to visit them last weekend, it was incredibly challenging. It hurt deeply that they didn't say much to me and seemed reluctant to see me at all.